What is Hinduism? Who is a Hindu? What is its worldview? What does it teach us? Origins of Hinduism. The Rigveda mentions a river called Saraswati. The three foundational texts of Hinduism are dialogic. I am speaking today on a subject which is a vast one, but it is extremely contextual. What is Hinduism? Who is a Hindu? What is its worldview? What does it teach us? These are questions which we need to ask ourselves today, because there is a churn on in the country to interpret this great religion, also called Sanatan, and to, in a way, interpret it to suit their own needs. And so it is essential to understand why this religion has existed for thousands of years, what are its distinguishing characteristics, and what is happening with it today. First and foremost, I think we have to understand that the origins of Hinduism lay in an exceptionally eclectic view of the world, not a dogmatic, not a doctrinaire, not a prescriptive view. Why do I say that? I would urge you all to read a remarkable passage which is probably part of the first written text of Hinduism. It is from the Rigveda. The Rigveda itself was traditionally thought to be written, the old theory, in about 1500 BCE. It was a theory largely propounded by the British, and it entailed the conquest of India, or the invasion of India by Aryans who came around 1500, overwhelmed the existing civilization here, including the Indus Valley civilization. And around 1200 BCE, dated the Rigveda. But today, modern science is telling us that this chronology that we have been given is false. I say this not with any sense of chauvinism or xenophobia, but purely on verifiable scientific data. The Rigveda mentions a river called Saraswati. There are at least 14 references to a mighty, tempestuous, overflowing river coming down from the Himalayas into the sea. There are 14 independent hymns which are dedicated solely to the Saraswati. And in the Rigveda, there are 72 occasions when obeisance is paid to this mighty river Saraswati. So if we assume that such a river, because the name is specifically given, existed, Today, modern science is telling us, when I say modern science, I mean satellite imagery, hydrological data, other excavational evidence, that Saraswati began to dry up sometime between 2500 BCE and 2000. What was the cause? We don't know. But perhaps there were tectonic shifts, and the waters of the Saraswati flowed into two other rivers, the Satluj and the Yamuna, and it began to dry up. And by 1500 BCE, it would have become hardly a rivulet. The paleo channel, which was that of the Saraswati, has been identified as that belonging to the now much smaller Ghagra river, renamed. So if the Saraswati was drying up from 2500 BCE, and if the Rigveda in at least 45 hymns mentions it and describes it vividly as a tempestuous, as I said, mighty river, has 11 hymns dedicated solely to Saraswati, and in 72 places it praises Saraswati. If that is the case, then obviously the Rigveda must have been written prior to this river having dried up. And this has been very beautifully revealed in Michael Danino's book, who has spent a lifetime researching this, backed by scientific data objectively. Then the Rigveda must have been written sometime in the 3rd millennium BCE, which takes its antiquity much further back. And so, in that Rigveda, written now literally 8,000 years ago, there is a remarkable passage. And I say remarkable because I'm going to read a portion of it for you. It's called the Nasadiya Sukta. And it will give you a tenor, the tone and tenor of what Hinduism began with and what its character was as it evolved over the centuries and millennia. The Rigveda in this Sukta says, "There was neither non-existence nor existence then. There was neither the realm of space nor the sky which is beyond. What stirred? In whose protection? Was there water bottomlessly deep? There was neither death nor immortality then. There was no distinguishing sign of night or day. That one breathed, windless, by its own impulse. By its own impulse, other than that, there was nothing beyond. Who really knows? Who will here proclaim it? Whence was it produced? Whence is this creation? Who then knows whence it has arisen? Whence the creation has arisen? Perhaps it formed itself, or perhaps it did not. The one who looks down on it in the highest heaven only knows, or perhaps he does not know. Now, this is a rumination on the origins of the universe, and it is remarkable for its eclectic tone and tenor. There are no certitudes, no injunctions for obeisance. It is not prescriptive. There are no religious commands or call to ritual. Yes, there is a sense of awe or wonderment. But the important thing is that there is a proclivity to ask questions, to interrogate, to explore, to assert while accepting the possibility of negation. Remember, we are talking of the first text which is known on Hinduism, which is the Rigveda. This is the tone and tenor of it. And that is from where Hinduism, as we know it, as a way of life and as a philosophy, has evolved. And in the later years, after this came the Vedas. As you all know, there are 4 Vedas: the Rigveda, the Yajurveda, the Samaveda, and the Atharvaveda. Now together these are called Samhitas. Each of these can be divided roughly into 3 parts. One are called Brahmanas, which are essentially priestly manuals of ritual. So that is one strand. The others are called Aranyakas. Aranya means forest. And they already bring out the sense of mysticism within Hinduism, because they are not talking of ritual but actually reflecting that first verse, the Nasadiya Sukta of the Rigveda. And the third category are perhaps one of the greatest texts known to mankind, the Upanishads. The Upanishads were the attachments to different Vedas, and because they came at the end of the Vedas, they are called also Vedanta. And from these texts evolved the philosophy of Hinduism. There are 3 foundational texts in Hinduism: the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Upanishads, once again, in the nature of that first verse I quoted, are ruminations but with a definite message in mind. To give you a flavor of the Upanishads, I'm going to read a passage or 2, because, for instance, the Mundak Upanishad says, above the senses, please follow my words carefully, above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intellect. Above that is the ego. And above the ego is the unmanifested cause. And beyond is Brahman, omnipresent, attributeless. Realizing him, one is released from the cycle of birth and death. This notion of Brahman, or Brahman as it is said in English, is the chief message of the Upanishads. And the important thing is that Brahman is not a deity. Brahman is, or Brahm is, the insight of ancient seers, perhaps in a forest, trying to find the essential underlying cause of this Brahman, this cosmos. And they came to this conclusion that it is a pulsating cosmic consciousness, which is achintya, beyond sight, beyond thought, adrisht, beyond sight, akhand, indivisible, purna, complete in itself. Sarva pratyaya darshanan, supreme intellect, nirvisheshin matram, undifferentiated consciousness, and above all, being omnipotent, omniscient in you and in me, in animate and inanimate objects, this pulsating cosmic consciousness, not a deity, this pervades the entire universe. And so we have another passage from the Upanishads. The effulgent self who is beyond thought shines in the greatest, shines in the smallest, shines in the farthest, shines in the nearest, shines in the secret chamber of the heart. The flowing river is lost in the sea. The illumined sage is lost in the self, self with a capital S. The flowing river has become the sea. The illumined sage has become the self. You are that cosmic consciousness. It is within you and it is without you. And there are lines which illustrate this beautifully. The Upanishads, I tell you, there are wonderful translations of it. I am particularly fond of the one by Eknath Ishwaran. And he says, as by knowing one lump of clay, dear one. Now here is a guru talking to a shishya. By the way, I want to stress, the three foundational texts of Hinduism are dialogic. They are not prescriptive or a fiat or a command. The Upanishads are a dialogue. The Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna and Arjuna speak to each other, is a dialogue. Even the Brahma Sutra, which are remarkable for the brevity of their aphorisms on Vedanta, this philosophy, always in their commentaries will put in the point of view of the opponent, rather than saying this alone is right. And so, in the Upanishads they say, as by knowing one lump of clay, dear one, we come to know all things made out of clay, that they differ only in name and form, nama rupa, while the stuff of which we all are made is clay. There can be different forms, but the essence is the same, which is you and which is me. As by knowing one gold nugget, dear one, we come to know all things made out of gold, that they differ only in name and form, while the stuff of which is all are made is gold, and so on and so forth. He says this, and then there is this wonderfully foundational line of the Upanishads. In the beginning, go back to the Nasadiya Sukta. Understand the tenor of Hinduism. In the beginning was only being, one without a second. Out of himself he brought forth the cosmos and entered into everything in it. There is nothing does not come from him. Of everything he is the innermost self. Here is the truth, here is the self supreme. And finally, to just give you, because this is important, you have to understand Hinduism. Mahatma Gandhi said, I am willing to give up all the scriptures of Hinduism just for these lines. And these lines are, Purnamida, Purnamidim, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnmadai, Purnameva Vashishyate. Just see the meaning of this. All this is full, complete. All that is full. Purnamida Purnamidim. From fullness, fullness comes. When fullness, it is taken away from fullness. It's a mathematical principle. When fullness is taken away from fullness, fullness still remains, which is that Brahman. So, the Upanishads established the notion of Brahman, and then we had, much later, the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy, which I will come to. We don't have one system. Please understand, when I said the eclectic tone of Hinduism, there is no one text. But to develop the most powerful Hindu doctrine of Advaita, of non-duality, of that Brahman, that cosmic consciousness, Adi Shankaracharya in the 8th century, and we'll come to him also, developed it. And so the question came that if it is only that attributeless Nirguna Brahman, what is all this world about? As Ghalib says, जबकि तुझ बिन नहीं कोई मौजूद तो ये हंगामा ये खुदा क्या है? When we are all that cosmic consciousness, then what is this empirical world? Shankaracharya and others say that this empirical world exists, but is ephemeral. It is unstable. It is transient. That which is capable of change is transient, cannot be the truth. It exists and it exists not. And we make the mistake of taking this ephemeral, transient world as the real reality, while ignoring, neglecting, or marginalizing our essential being, which is that elevating cosmic consciousness. And why does that happen? Our philosophers ascribe it to something called avidya, ignorance, error of perception, which again is based on a very scientific analysis of the mind. According to them, the mind consists of 3 basic elements: buddhi, intellect; ahamkar, ego; and chitta, that silent consciousness, mostly overwhelmed by your worldly precautions, occupations, which is within you. Now the intellect, the buddhi, is forever active. If you wake up from sleep at night, the mind is active. It's like a monkey jumping from one branch of a tree to another. And it ensnares us in its own web of constant activity. That's why in yoga they say, yoga chitta vriddhi nirodh. When thought ceases, yoga begins. So this is buddhi. Ahamkar, the sense of ego, I am. And that is very strong. It's impossible to negate. Our world revolves around the fact that I am. And that again pushes that chitta to the background. But if you still the mind, if you remove the ego, that chitta, that silent, aware consciousness within you awakes. And that consciousness is Atma. And Atma and Brahm are the same. Brahm within you is Atma. And one of the great Mahavakyas of the Upanishads are Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahm. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. Not the buddhi, not the ego. That thou art. Ayam Atma Brahm. I, Atma and Brahm, the two are the same. And so when we allow that chitta, that Atma within us to actually regain the ground which is your essential self, this ephemeral world exists but does not entrap you. And the magic by the way it entraps you is that great elusive magician called Maya. Maya, that sense of I. Tulsidas, in one of the most brilliantly, the brevity takes your breath away, is asked by Bharat. Sri Ram is asked by Bharat, what is Maya? And he says, just in one line, Main arumor tor te Maya. I, mine, and yours is Maya. That illusion of separateness, because we are all indivisibly part of that same consciousness. Today, modern science, and I'm not a Dinanath Batra school of Hinduism, which said there were aeroplanes and televisions in the ancient past and cars used to fly. But in my book on Adi Shankaracharya, there is a full chapter called The Validation of Science. The latest scientists, the advent of quantum physics, the knowledges of cosmology, and the study of the mind are showing that consciousness comes before matter. And I give a very detailed exposition on it. And it has been carried out. I'll give you a simple example. In one of the most scientific labs in America, a trained meditationist is monitored, his brain is monitored, and just as he is about to slip into the deepest moments of meditation, he tugs at a string which alerts the scientists, and they do a spectrography of his brain. And in that deep meditation, all the colors of the brain change. They become hues of calm, hues of total serenity, of peace within yourself, a sense of belonging to all and all belonging to you, a sense of oneness, what is called nirvana. It has been scientifically mapped. And so, these scientific developments, quantum physics has shown that what you see as real is not real at all. Matter is energy, energy is matter, time is itself, as shown by the black holes. And Einstein above all, relative. So this difference between the real and the unreal is being validated by science today. And so, therefore, there is this powerful Advaita school.